please don't spam the chat, okay? Just to say hi. Like, I see some of you right now saying hello or no. I will directly type to you if I see you doing that. Please don't, okay? So just save it for
Babe,
questions.
so she works at Google, right?
So she's gonna go ahead and do all of that. So welcome, Miss Austin. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And I guess just to give a little bit of a background, I don't work at Google currently, but I worked there for almost 14 years. And so I'm just going to give a little bit of a background and then I'll take questions at the end. So just think of your questions as I go along, and then you can either raise your Zoom hand or then I'll start looking at chat messages also if you want to write your questions in the chat. So I'm just going to start off. So my name is Jennifer Austin, and I started off working at Google for the founders of Google, who started the company in 1999. And I started there in 2004, very early on. And when I started there, we ended up acquiring a startup company called Keyhole, which then became Google Earth. And what I'm going to just do right now is switch to, let's see, screen share.
And you should have permission now at the bottom of your Zoom to share your screen.
Okay.
And maybe Ellie, if you can't find it, Ellie
I know, I'm helping her.
Help you.
I think I want to do desktop. Let's try this. Okay, so you can see this now, and so smaller here. Okay, great. So try to hit present mode. There we go. Okay, great. So I just want to start off with showing you a little bit about when I first started at Google. The then founder, Sergey Brin, he asked me to buy a copy of Keyhole, which is what it looked like right now. Right here on the left, it was like you saw some satellite imagery. Here's the United States, North America, here's South America. But all of this blue area was just like a flat blue that you couldn't explore. It was blue marble. So you really couldn't understand that there was topography, seamounts, interesting things in the ocean. And what happened was, like, I'm not sure exactly when, but not long after Google acquired Keyhole and then launched it as Google Earth, the founding CEO of Keyhole, John Hanke, he was at a conference in Spain, and there was a famous ocean explorer there named Sylvia Earle. And she got up on stage, and they were both getting awards for their various work, and she said, I really love Google Earth, and my grandson flies all around, but you should really call it Google Dirt because it's missing all of the oceans. And so he laughed, and he's like, hey, Sylvia, why don't you come to Google and give a talk? And so I got to host her first tech talk at Google, where she came and talked about the ocean, why it was important, and how there were issues that were happening that could really need, how technology could really bring to bear some changes to help people. And let's see, I'm not sure how I escape. Do you know how I can escape? There we go. Yeah, so I'm just going to switch to Google Earth right now. What is that? Oh.
When you have troubles.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Computers are difficult.
Oh no, that's okay. We definitely can be patient with that because I'm sure you use different platforms. Thank you.
So just switching from Presently to Google Earth, where I can actually show you Google Earth. So so Sylvia came and she said, with knowing comes caring, and with caring there's hope. So at the time, people didn't really think about the ocean. It was far away. You couldn't really go there, most people, and you really couldn't get a sense of what was there. And so she thought, hey, if we could add some sort of virtual ocean, it might inspire people to explore, care, learn more, want to take an interest. Because there are a lot of issues happening out at sea that are kind of out of sight, out of mind. So this is Google Earth, the Google Earth software, and one of the first things that most people do is they look around, they're like, oh, here's the Earth, here's Africa, and then they fly to their home. And so we're not going to fly to our home, but we're going to fly to Forest Hill, where hopefully students will be going again. So it's a little jittery. And what you can see here is you can zoom in from outer space, and it has this neat effect, and you can sort of fly in and kind of get a sense of what the area around Forest Hill looks like. Here's the soccer field and the garden. And so, that's what a lot of people did when when Google first launched Google Earth, is they flew around, they saw their house, and like, oh, that's cool. But that's sort of where it ended. And then, let me zoom out again. So then Sylvia ended up convincing us that we ought to start working on creating a virtual ocean. And so I, at the time, was sharing an office with one of the other founders of Keyhole, and was talking about this, how it would be so great, and he offered to start helping on how you would create that virtual ocean, and that got other engineers to work on it. And so with me and another colleague, we ended up forming a team. So Google had this idea, this notion that you could work on something you wanted to do in your 20% time. So in addition to whatever your normal job responsibilities are. And so we ended up starting to look at like building partnerships with external data providers like the Navy. And you can see down here in the bottom of Google Earth, there's Scripps, NOAA, US Navy, NGA, JEPCO. These are groups that curate and collect this underwater mapping data. And then we started working with them, pulling that data together, figuring out how we could add it to the full Google Earth, and we ended up adding to the Google Maps product also. And before I go too further, I just also wanted to share, in addition to building this terrain map, we work with partners to build display content that they could overlay on top of Google Earth and understand more about the ocean. So I just want to pull up real quick. This is an overlay map of the first map of the ocean that was ever released in 1977. So that's over 40 years ago. And what you can see here, this was built by Marie Tharp with Bruce Heezen at Columbia University Lamont Doherty Labs. So at that time, women were not allowed at sea on research vessels. So men would go out and they would collect data and they would drop sounding lines, and later the multi-beam echo sounder would be developed where people could bounce sound from the bottom of ships, collect that sound, and then build a map. But at the time, these ships would go out, drop a lead line, say, okay, this is the depth right there, and then we would bring that data back, and it would sit, in papers and stuff. And no one really had a real sense of what did that look like. So she started gathering all of that data, Marie Tharp, and building it together and painting sea mountains. So this is the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. This is the east coast of the United States, like New York City, Washington, D.C. And then as you go out here, you see there's Cuba, the Puerto Rican Trench. And then as you head over eastward, there's this giant ridge, which looks like it's a boundary between two plates.
Oh, I know what it is.
Say again?
I know what it is.
What?
Is it, never mind. Probably don't, some parties probably don't know.
It's okay. Like, it's called the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, and it's actually the connection between two continental plates. So at the time, the theory of plate tectonics was just a theory, and many people didn't believe in it. And when Marie Tharp published this map with Bruce Heezen, it began to give people a sense that, oh, this is really true. Seeing is believing. There really are these plate boundaries, and along those boundaries is where a lot of earthquakes happen. So if we zoom around the Earth right here, you see off Asia, there's Japan, and there's this giant trench that goes up like here. That's the plate boundary. And this whole area is called the Ring of Fire, where many earthquakes and thus we've seen tsunamis and other things happen. And we're here off the west coast of the US in California. So this whole Ring of Fire, these sea mountains, the world had never seen the ocean like this before. So it was an amazing, incredible historic map that they were able to publish. It was very exciting for the time and really transformative. So that is just one of the things that we can share after this lecture. You can download Google Earth, which is free. You can download this tour as a KMZ file, open it up, double click on this folder, overlay that map, and explore on your own, because it's really, I found so many interesting things looking through that data. So now we're going to fly off the coast of California in what's called Monterey Bay. So many of you may have seen this. It's a giant canyon in between Monterey here with my circle hand and Santa Cruz Mountains, and it's deeper than the Grand Canyon, and they're actually standing waves that go along this giant canyon toward Moss Landing. And this is because it's so close, deep, and shallow water. It's where a lot of whales go and feed. It's a very rich area. And what we did when we launched the virtual map of the ocean is we created that ocean surface you just saw us dive through. You can dive underwater, and then you can explore all these sort of underwater crevasses, and you could get a sense of what the ocean really looks like underwater. And then we're going to fly to the very mouth of this canyon where we have the highest resolution data. Right here, it's 1 meter terrain data where the MBARI, the Research Institute, which is connected to the Monterey Bay Aquarium, they have these little submersibles that can go, along the ridge, and they took high resolution data there. So next, that's one underwater place you can explore, and then we're going to fly over to one of my favorite places, the Hawaiian Islands. And what many people don't realize, but in Hawaii, and these are the Hawaiian Islands here, we're flying down. In Hawaii, it's actually Mauna Kea is the largest mountain from the bottom of the seafloor to the top of the mountain, even bigger than Mount Everest in the world. And it's kind of hard to see with this relief right now. But if you switch to Marie Tharp's map, you can really get a sense of the painted topography that gives you a sense of the height. And then if you dive underwater, you can see that this is the Loihi Seamount, and that will be in however many 100,000 years, the next Hawaiian island. So as lava is released underwater and it keeps building and building, this will eventually come up out of the water, as the Big Island did long ago, and turn into the next Hawaiian island. Next, we're going to fly across the Pacific towards the Marianas Trench. This is the deepest part of the ocean off Guam. And over 50 years ago, in 1960, Jacques Piccard and Captain Don Walsh were the first ever to go underwater in this Trieste submarine to the bottom of the Marianas Trench, which is the deepest part of the ocean. So we're just going to go underwater a little bit. And what was kind of fun part of the ocean program, we ended up working with some data providers to create 3D models. So this is a 3D model of the Trieste in Google Earth, and you can kind of fly around it and see that sub. They went all the way down there, and Don Walsh has a really exciting story about what it was like. They heard a big bang while they were going down, and they were like, oh my gosh, are we gonna make it? It was quite harrowing, because it's very deep, the pressure there. So if there's any kind of break in your window, you'll basically explode. And so it's quite dangerous to go to those depths because the pressure is so high. Interestingly, most recently, Kathy Sullivan, who's an astronaut from the US, she and another explorer who built a new submarine recently went to the bottom of the trench, and then they went to the top of Mauna Kea, so they set a new record, going to the deepest and the highest points on Earth, which is very exciting.
Wait, isn't the bottom of the Mariana Trench lava?
I don't think so.
Well, it's probably hot because it's closer to the core of the Earth. I don't know.
It's actually very cold underwater and
Well,
completely
yeah,
dark.
I know that, but
at that depth,
Yeah.
completely dark. And how I remember them describing it is that it looks like a bunch of kind of silt. So it's like a deep layer of silt, which is like a kind of loose, kind of kind of sand and water kind of mix, slurry at the bottom of the trench. There are places where there's volcanic activity, like we just saw in Loihi, because new lava is being formed, where there it would be volcanic. But here, that's not how I've heard it described, but it's a good question. Okay, so now we're gonna fly across the ocean to off the east coast, and I just want to give you a little bit of a zoom out. We're gonna zoom out here, just so you see. Yeah, like this is the United States here. This is Florida. This is the East Coast, and off here in the Atlantic, we're gonna zoom in here. And if you're ever looking at Google Earth, as you zoom in, you see these 3 track lines, because people have driven ships all around this area looking for probably the most famous shipwreck in the world. Can anyone say it?
the Titanic.
Exactly.
Titanic.
Exactly.
Titanic. I was just about to ask about the Titanic and then this happened, so I was like, okay.
That's awesome. Well, this is the 3D model of the Titanic that we published. We worked with National Geographic to get the imagery for the exterior of the Titanic. And as you can see, when it sank, it split and broken apart into 2 parts. So this is, this is the fore part, and we'll go to the aft. And there's a video that we'll provide in the Explore on Your Own resources, where you can watch a tour that I made with another famous explorer, Jim Delgado, who went there. And he said that when they went down in the Soviet Mir subs, maybe 15, 20 years ago. And they said they went in to some of the empty rooms, and it seemed like there were like the figures, of people who had perished still on the ship. So it's a grave site, and a really just an amazing story. So you can go and explore that. And then kind of getting short on time, we're going to fly off to Australia. And we published various versions of this underwater terrain map. And the one that we published in 2015 to 2016 was we basically created the best
Coral reefs?
virtual map. No, these were all kind of relatively not as high resolution as coral reefs.
I've heard of it.
Oh.
But I'm going to show you something in just a moment. Anyway, in the imagery, in the terrain, they discovered a new microplate called the Mammox microplate. And then the last thing, and then we'll switch to coral reefs. We're going to fly off to San Francisco, which is just north of here. You can see the city in the distance, and we're going to go to the Golden Gate Bridge. So next, after we built this map of the ocean and we got it published, then we worked on basically getting Street View imagery. So you may have seen Google Street View cars with this camera on top driving around. Let's see. Well, we worked with various providers to collect data. To get Street View data from ocean-interested sites. So we're going to try to see if this works. If you keep zooming in, eventually when you get close enough to imagery, it will turn into Street View. which is that product I mentioned where it's like imagery taken from these 360 cameras. I'll show you a picture in a minute, but this is Street View imagery we collected off of San Francisco all along the shoreline. And that's me taking pictures. So I was on a boat, and then we were remote controlling a robot that then would drive along with the Street View camera and collect the imagery. So if you click on these white arrows, it basically moves along the Street View imagery, and you can get a sense of what it actually looks like in the water beyond
Go look
the
at yourself
terrain.
again.
Wait a second. It's not Google Street View, it's Google Water View.
Yeah.
Go to
They
yourself.
could call it that. They
Show
could call it
yourself.
that. So,
Do you guys have a satellite image of Alcatraz?
Can I say something real quick?
yeah.
Well, I heard of this story of Flight 370, which crashed, but it's a mystery and no one knows where it crashed. So I was wondering if I could find it on Google Maps or Google Earth.
People have looked, but when it crashed, I think that it disintegrated in many pieces, so you wouldn't be able to see it in Google Earth. So Google Earth usually has delayed content, so delayed data. So it's not live, but even if it was live, it would be really hard to. I don't think it would be possible. Just one thing.
I still have a quick question.
Yeah. Just this is Alcatraz, I think. Someone had asked about Alcatraz. Okay, go ahead.
I have a quick question. Is there any images of the Bermuda Triangle?
So we have the Bermuda, you can fly to Bermuda in Google Earth if you took. Yeah, and when you have this on your own, you can just type in the search box. Like here, we're gonna search Bermuda. We're gonna fly in Google Earth over to Bermuda. And here it is. And if you zoom out, here's Bermuda, and you can see that it is a sea mountain. And here we're gonna scroll out. And this area is considered the Bermuda Triangle, but it's not like a physical triangle that you can see in the ocean. But you can see these track lines, like the higher res track lines, and that's where ships have gone along the seafloor and bounced sound to collect data. So now I'm just gonna show you, we talked about a lot of this. I know we're running out of time. Someone had asked about underwater imagery. So I just wanted to show a quick video. So after we worked on building this virtual map of the ocean, we ended up working with a third party to create an underwater Street View camera. They modeled their camera after our above water design, and you're gonna see it in a moment. This is our launch video. There's the camera. See, it's got that circular Street View looking design. This is some of here they are collecting the imagery. There's a giant coral head, Apo Island, Philippines. Parrotfish. Looks like jacks. Manta ray. So that just gives you a little visual. We went on to collect a lot of imagery underwater with what we called underwater Street View. And we'll send follow-up links after this talk where you can have direct links into that underwater imagery. So here's the Galapagos sea lion. Here's the only undersea reef base called Aquarius off Florida. There's manta rays, whales, dolphins, coral reefs, just mola, an incredible amount of the sharks, imagery that you can explore, their shipwrecks. So does anyone have a particular favorite place in the ocean that we could maybe go look at in Street View real quick?
Can you go underwater in the Bermuda Triangle?
This is a good question if we have Bermuda. Let's look. Yes, so here's the Mary.
There's just one place.
So here is the Mary Celeste wreck in Bermuda. So if you go to this link, you basically can grab onto the screen and pull it around. And then you can, some of them are just 360 images, but then some of them you can double click on the imagery and actually move through it. Usually there's a white arrow. Yeah, so here we go. So if you double click on the screen, see here's this arrow, double click on it and it'll move you along that trajectory as if you're virtually exploring the wreck. So you can kind of see what it looks like now in Bermuda, off Bermuda. All right, does someone else want to?
Will you guys I have a question, not a place I want to go to. Well, I sort of wanted. Will you guys put like more sunken boats and crashed planes and wrecks and coral reefs in the future in Google Earth?
I presume that they continue to go ahead and publish more data. I've seen some subsequent updates. So I think groups continue to go, and it was for the underwater stuff, it was Underwater Earth, an agency in Australia who was working on this project. So you can go there and, or I guess continue to check Underwater Earth's website for updates. And there's another cool website called Globetrotting that has a lot of really interesting places and features that you can explore in Google Earth and Maps. So this is a whale shark off Mexico. So now I'm going to, I think, stop there with the presentation part. And if anyone has some questions,